We do have ASL interpretation available today. You would want to pin Joan S. and Chad B. to your screen in order to follow along with their ASL interpretation. We'll begin with our roll call. Lena Andrews.
Here.
Morgan Overton.
Here.
Dr. Jamil Bey.
Here.
Karen Garrett.
Here.
Jerome Jackson. Councilwoman Deb Gross. Mark Masterson.
Here.
Deirdre Washington. Marcus Reed. Dr. Paul Spradley. Alan Cisco.
I'm here. Hi.
Derek Tillman.
Here.
Esther Teclay.
Here.
Adrian Monaha.
Present.
I am Kelly Ware, and I am also present. And I'll pause for a moment. We have a special guest with us today. Sheila, if you would like to say a few words at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Board Chair Ware and Director Miller, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words today. My name is Sushila Nimani Stanger, and I'm the new Executive Director of the URA. I recognize that your time is valuable, but I just wanted to let you know that we're very grateful for your service and the care you take in this work. We're encouraged and hopeful knowing that Celeste Scott's legacy is realized through each of you and others who have served before you and the HOF board. I asked my team to conduct a quick analysis, and as of today, the HOF has deployed and leveraged close to $200 million in investment specifically related to the creation and preservation of affordable and quality housing for individuals and community groups since its existence. This equates to over 600 families receiving direct support. And these are really noteworthy figures. But I also know that we have the opportunity to grow stronger and have a greater impact. And I know that you all work in various capacities outside of this role. So please know that the URA leadership is supportive of you, and please let me know how I can help. And thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you for joining us. We're excited to begin working even more closely with you in this role. We do have one announcement in terms of changes for the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. Megan Winters has resigned her role for a neighborhood based nonprofit from the West End, and so we will be awaiting a new appointment to her seat, as well as Joanna Deming, who had resigned because she took a new position at last month's meeting. We are having a bit of difficulty. We do have public comment that is coming. I believe somebody who physically was in chambers who were trying to get logged in to be able to share their thoughts with us. We certainly do want to encourage public comment, however, in whatever form. So we're going to pause when that person is able to join us. But in the meantime, we're going to keep rolling through the agenda as we go. So we'll begin with the minutes from our January 5th meeting. Has everyone had the opportunity to review those minutes? Do you have any additions or corrections to said minutes?
Move to approve.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Do you have a second?
I second it.
Okay, that would be Karen for our record. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Jamil will abstain. I was not present
Okay.
at that meeting.
And for our minute taking, Dr. Paul Spradley has joined us. I believe from council chambers. If I'm correct. All right. So the next item on our agenda is do we have public comment? Is our public commenter able? Have they been able to join us? Do we see anybody? Jen, just to pause for a second. No?
I don't
I
see
don't
them.
see anybody.
Okay, all right. So then we will come back to this when they join us, and we'll move on to a presentation and some recommendations by Megan Confer-Hammond, who is no stranger to us here at the Hoff, who is, go ahead and let us know share some of her thoughts.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Hi, everyone. And so, as I promised last month and in 2022, we are hitting the ground running from the Fair Housing Committee of the HOF Advisory Board with creating actionable items in 2023. And so I am excited to present to you what the Fair Housing Committee has put together so far. And for your consideration as a follow-up on the discussion we've been having about racial equity as it applies particularly to the rental gap program. So I will share my screen to show a PowerPoint and go from there. So what I want to go through today is going through the understanding. So you understand that the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh is a private nonprofit that is contracted through HUD's Department of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity to advocate and ensure that the fair housing laws at the federal level are actually in place at the local level. And so one quick announcement in the fair housing space, if you haven't seen it yet, is that HUD last week issued a new proposed Affirmly Furthering Fair Housing rule. This rule has been awaited since the current federal administration has come into office, and it creates the requirement that recipients of federal funding, including municipalities, create what's called an equity plan. And the highlights of the required equity plan is about setting realistic goals, is about being available for public review and comment and transparency, and functions as what the local commitment is to addressing fair housing or inequities within the housing market. So the comment period hasn't actually started yet for the proposed rule, but this body will certainly be able to provide a comment or post a comment if this body is interested in doing so once comments are enabled. So what we're talking about today is I'm going to go through the data that we discussed over the past few months and then an example of what that data looks like. And so to remind you that there's a distinction between affordable housing and fair housing. And we are tasked with that we must consider housing discrimination simultaneously to addressing the affordable housing crisis. Because if we don't, then the affordable housing that this body is putting forward, which is extremely necessary, will only continue and potentially worsen the existing inequities that we have in the city within our housing market due to housing discrimination concerns. And so what today's focus is on our city's racial segregation. And so what I want to highlight as we go through the data is to understand that when you look at our housing market is that we have to be looking at the overall Pittsburgh as a city, and also what our affordable housing market is in its demographics as well. And to consider both at the same time, because no data exists in a bubble. And what this starts to look like is taken directly off of HUD's current AFFH tool, is that within the city of Pittsburgh, that the racial makeup of our affordable housing is overwhelmingly different based on the type of affordable housing. And we're going to highlight and focus in on the differentiation between our public housing, our housing authority, and units that are built as project-based Section 8. And so according to the HUD data, just as math, is that our housing authority units are overwhelmingly housing residents who are Black compared to our project-based Section 8 units. In fact, our project-based Section 8 units are have nearly 4 times greater white households than our public housing units. And so we know that the type of affordable housing that we're building is going into a market where the status quo is racial segregation based solely on the funding source that is the driver of that project. And so with that data in mind, what we want to apply as a racial equity lens is an understanding of what can this body do in its understanding of the applications in front of it in order to gather the data that helps us assess what is happening in our city with our racial segregation in the affordable housing market, as well as to inform the discussions that you're having as you are talking with the developers of the proposed projects. And so before I go through what we are proposing, I want to take you through a more concrete example. And so consider the city of Pittsburgh and consider the neighborhood of Brookline. Now, consider whatever you know about Brookline. Brookline, as a matter of geography, is in the Pittsburgh South. And as a southern neighborhood, it is actually on Pittsburgh's border, our border with Allegheny County. And in fact, one of its bordering municipalities is Mount Lebanon. So that's the context and whatever other personal experience you have with understanding what Brookline is as a city of Pittsburgh neighborhood. So then, now let's look at the data on the context of what Brookline is as a neighborhood. So in the city of Pittsburgh, the average demographic, the demographic for the entire neighborhood is that for the entire city, is that the city of Pittsburgh is about 23% Black Pittsburghers and about 65% white Pittsburghers. So we go to our neighborhood of Brookline and we start to realize that based on a neighborhood level, that Brookline is 6.2% Black. And so we start to realize that the racial segregation is present in Brookline, where we are seeing an overwhelmingly white majority, even in the context of the demographics of the city as a whole. And so as we understand that about the neighborhood of Brookline, just as a data point, this isn't meant to be any sort of moral determination, but a data point in understanding math and equity and what we can do to take intentional efforts to address it over time. And so I want to bring your attention to Parkside Manor. Parkside Manor has been around since around the late 80s, and it is an apartment high-rise on Brookline Boulevard. And in the Google Street View, this is what it looks like on Brookline Boulevard. And as you can imagine, Parkside Manor is a project-based Section 8 property. And it's for seniors who are ages 62 and over. And therefore, it consists entirely of one-bedroom units. Now, the data that we've been discussing these past few months has been indicating that what happens with affordable housing is that neighborhoods that are overwhelmingly white demographics will permit or allow or be comfortable with affordable housing when it's for seniors. Because all families have family members or friends who are on fixed incomes or who have disabilities who are in need of affordable housing. And so not simply in Pittsburgh, but nationwide over the past 30 years particularly, we have seen senior housing properties become or function as a proxy of a status quo of racial segregation or even worsening the pre-existing racial segregation of its region. And so that's why we have so many ongoing discussions about whether or not a proposed development is a senior property or for families, because we have a particular absence of family-sized units. So I'm going to keep going in the data. And so we're going to look in the neighborhood of Brookline, in the city of Pittsburgh, Census Tract 1918. And Census Tract 1918 is where Parkside Manor is. And now, within that specific census tract, white households are 85.2% of the total population. That is a greater white population than the city of Pittsburgh, than Brookline as a neighborhood. And now the Black Pittsburghers in Brookline have dropped under 5%. And so we keep increasing the racial segregation as we get closer to the property itself. And this is the kind of site analysis that we want to do simply to understand the context in which a proposed RGP application is going to be built. Because the conversation we're going to be having is about what we want to encourage or mandate or support the developer to do that affirmatively markets that property to counteract the racial segregation of the site. And so what happens, and I want you to think, there's going to be one more data set that we have here. And the HUD AFFH tool has provided us with the data set about the demographics of the tenants inside Parkside Manor, who is living in Parkside Manor right now. And given the data that we're looking at now, what do you think those demographics are? So this is a bird's eye view of where Parkside Manor is. And I'm doing this to show you as we look at the census tract. So this is Brookline Boulevard right here. And then here is the sports field right next to it, as a matter of context. And as we look at the racial data of the tract, this is where Parkside Manor is right here. And what that dot means and what these green shades mean is that not only is Parkside Manor in a neighborhood that's a border neighborhood for the city of Pittsburgh, but it's in a census tract that is a border census tract to an ongoing nature in which Pittsburgh neighborhoods overall become more lightly populated as you go south. And so the exact location of Parkside Manor, so the darker green that the tract is the higher amount of a Black population that the tract has. And the lighter green is a lower amount of a Black population. And so the census tract itself for the development is in fact a border tract as the city of Pittsburgh has an increasingly white population. And what that looks like when Parkside Manor's tenants actually move in is that Parkside Manor, or as reported to HUD, has 0 Black households. It is 98.7 consisting of white households, and there is a 1.5% of Asian households within the property. So how does that possibly happen given the need that we know the affordable housing, the low-income housing community has for affordable housing, that we know that low-income Black Pittsburghers have for affordable housing, that we know that low-income Black seniors have for affordable housing? How do we possibly have a property of site-based Section 8, project-based Section 8, that has absolutely no Black households residing in it? And that is the framework in which we are having these discussions. That is the context that the new proposals for new construction or preservation of affordable housing, that is the racial segregation context in which already exists, that the decisions that we make here are going to interact with, are going to be a part of. And so unless we're intentional about getting the information and understanding what's necessary to populate that new development with a diverse tenant population, we're going to continue to see this pattern that is going to continue to racially segregate our city. So what that gives us is the opportunity to use the federal requirement of creating an equity plan of affirmatively furthering fair housing to make a local solution. But in order to do that, we have to act with intention and we have to move efforts forward and try something. And we have a set of goals, and then we have an assessment, and there's no outcome, there's no strategy we can put in place today that's going to solve the problem tomorrow. But we try, then we assess our effort, and then we tweak it and pivot it as necessary to keep trying, to keep making intentional efforts to address the racial segregation, not only of our city as a whole, but the racial segregation that occurred within our affordable housing market as well. So what that looks like and what the Fair Housing Committee has created is what the kind of information that is provided to you as the advisory board about a rental gap program. So the red text here is the racial equity fair housing information, and the black text is the standard information that you receive when you get a RGP application and you're reviewing the project. And what we want to do with this data is we understand that the rental gap program by definition is not so much about the physical development itself. It is just that it is gap funding to get the project over the line into breaking out the shovels and actually doing construction. Our focus is on gathering the data that is necessary to continue to understand how our affordable housing market is or is not racially segregated for our knowledge, and then to also understand what is necessary to have a robust fair housing marketing plan that then does the best possible effort by the developer and the property management to populate the resulting building with a diverse demographic, to take that intentional effort to not let the affordable housing development be a part of our city's racial segregation. So I'll spend a few minutes to go over what these pieces are in the form of what we put together. So what we're asking you to consider is that the rental gap program applicants are answering whether or not housing choice vouchers are being accepted at that property, and if not, to explain why. And why this is critical is because using that same HUD AFFH data is Pittsburgh's HCV housing choice voucher holders are overwhelmingly Black households, 81.33%. The only type of housing that has a higher percentage of Black households are units operated by the Public Housing Authority. And so by layering the subsidy of the voucher, it increases affordability as an affordability measure. And by accepting vouchers at the affordable developments that are being built, regardless of the percentages of AMI that the property is serving, it is a direct and immediate step that will access a proportionately large amount of low-income Black Pittsburghers as far as giving the households access to the property. And similarly is understanding the number of bedrooms and their breakdown within the property, because that is consistent with understanding the concept that senior housing throughout Pittsburgh, throughout Allegheny County, and throughout the country have been used over the past 30 or 50 years to create affordable housing that continues the region's racial segregation by creating senior housing in overwhelmingly white census tracts or neighborhoods. And so by gathering this information up front, we're going to start to immediately understand for a point of discussion about the context in our city that this proposed development is going to sit in. And it'll help to inform our discussion for how we would like to see, what our outcomes would like to see after the property is built and who is occupying it. So then similarly, it gets into some basic discussions on drop downs. It's not a intensive application or intensive series of questions, but it is immediate understanding of, is the property for families with minor age children? Is the properties for seniors? Is the property for people with disabilities? And so that you know, in case you don't, is that senior properties have two different ages. Ages 55 and over and ages 62 and over. 55 and over have what's called the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the households need to be ages 55 and over. And there's a specific flexibility that comes with the population due to the 80-20 rule. 62 and over has no flexibility whatsoever, and 100% of the households must be 62 and over. And so 55 and over properties give us a little bit of flexibility with the tenants that the property can be marketed to and the potential tenant pool who can eventually move into the property. Also, from a fair housing perspective, is understanding the site. And so is the property vacant land in which we are doing this consideration within the geographic context of its demographics, or is it currently in use? And if the property is currently in use and this is a preservation of affordable housing, then we need to make sure there is a strategy for the displacement of the current residents. We need to make sure that there is a right to return, and we need to make sure that we are not changing one low-income population for another. And the solution that we are developing or rehabilitating is not simply giving access to low-income housing to a different population than the residents who currently live there. And then we start to get into what's called the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan. What I want you to understand is that the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan is a federal requirement. This is not a requirement being implemented by this body, but this is a requirement that the developer would have already created. But as all of us understand in the different forms in which we exist, is that that requirement is only as powerful as its enforcement. And so what our role can be is to look at the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan that the developer already has to create and to understand what we need to see it locally, what we need to see it do in order for it to be meaningful and robust and responsive to the racial segregation that we know the property is being developed within. And so we get the census tract data immediately up front. This data is available easily within the census website, in which you put in an address and these demographics are immediately provided. And then for the developer to explain what are the goals, what is the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan trying to accomplish? You know, specific considerations for what it's meant to do is it's meant to understand who is least likely to apply to this property without actively, intentionally doing outreach to those populations. And once we identify who is least likely to apply, then we need to figure out how do we get the application to them in time for them to secure a unit on the wait list. And given that it's 2023, we need to consider, are we using social media platforms to get these waitlist applications in front of tenants? Are we doing in-person outreach activities? If it's family units, are we using the schools that are in that district? And if we're marketing to housing choice voucher holders, can we work with the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh to allow a referral process in order to make sure that there's access, given that there's a delay between the wait list and then it becoming available, there's a time limit to using a voucher, but taking specific strategies to actually connect these populations who are least likely to apply in order to get the application in front of them, not to force anyone in Pittsburgh to move to the property, but the concept behind fair housing is housing choice, to make this property a choice, an option for Pittsburghers of all demographics, instead of the de facto demographics of that census tract. And then, while the proposed project is not yet built, it hasn't started development yet. That's what the gap funding is for. And so the development might not even have the property manager in place. But what we want to do to make sure that a diverse tenant population will eventually exist in that building is to have the developer commit to even basic concepts of what the tenant selection criteria are. Because what we all too often see in Pittsburgh, and one of the reasons why we have the racial segregation within our affordable units as it exists now, is because when the project-based Section 8 and the other forms of private subsidy properties are built, there's much more flexibility with the tenant criteria than you see with the Public Housing Authority, who also administers the Housing Choice Voucher Program or Section 8. And because of that, we often see, other than your required income, we see these units implementing a fair market criteria to all tenants. And the question that brings is, if I have evictions against me in the past, if I have credit history, my credit history is in the toilet, because I can't afford to live my life because I am low income, and this property is affordable based on my income, why is a traditional fair market assessment of my credit and eviction history germane to my ability of being able to make my rent payment at this property? So the kind of considerations we want to be looking for what the tenant selection criteria is does the applicant owe rent or monies to other low-income housing programs? Their reliability to pay is based on their income, and in similarly situated housing, have they made their rent payment? That is much more applicable than have I made my rent payment on the fair market? And that's similar to the eviction history. If I'm low income and I'm not making my rent payment in full because I don't have the money and I've been evicted due to that, why is that eviction relevant to my tenancy in this property, as opposed to solely whether or not I've been evicted from another low-income housing program. When we look at criminal history, we want to add the consideration that we're focusing on credible concerns about health and safety and property damage. We want to tighten the understanding of what a criminal history assessment is as a tenant qualification, because what the concept and the mission of the federal funds and the city of Pittsburgh and the diverse amounts of funds that are going into this property, the mission of those funds is to provide housing, not to be overly restrictive, similar to the private market with who that housing is for. And so that has some basic concepts such as conviction should not be a part of the criminal history review. Conviction should only be what's part of the criminal history review. Arrest should not be part of the review of a person's criminal history. The look back period should be limited, and that should differentiate between misdemeanors and felonies. And there's a whole set of criteria that can be done, that has been done, best practices can be provided. All this information can be provided to developers up front about what types of convicted crimes can create either there's lifetime bans, there's differentiations with the look back period in which that guilty plea or conviction happened. And it can be specific rather than a scattershot of having any criminal history whatsoever would result in a denied application to this property. And then as an income requirement, simply to add, is that if our project-based Section 8 and other forms of subsidy units are accepting Section 8 applicants, what we don't want to see happen, which unfortunately happens across the country, is that as a way to deny Section 8 applicants, housing providers can require the household has a monthly income that is 3 times the total rent. We want to make sure that properties that are accepting Section 8 vouchers have a required income that is 3 times or consistent with the household's rent portion through the voucher, and to make sure that we don't leave a carve out that would allow for a statement that Section 8 vouchers are accepted, but not actually have a follow through based on how the income is assessed that is on the total rent amount as opposed to the tenant's portion based on the Section 8 voucher. So we can provide the overall forms on what I've been reviewing. I've been trying to keep this brief given the amount of information I try to convey. But what our goal here is to cumulatively take the information that we've been talking about since November, specifically on racial equity within the rental gap program, and to propose a series of fields that is not about denying any applicant, but is about the advisory board collecting that data up front and framing the limited amount of time that you all have to discuss that property with the developer, to do the best that we can within the city of Pittsburgh to ensure that the ultimate tenant population of that property will do its very best to take intentional, meaningful steps forward to address in whatever way it can the racial segregation that the property will inherently exist in. So, open for thoughts, questions, or telling me to be quiet while you deliberate amongst yourselves, but I greatly appreciate your willingness to hear me out month in and month out, and hope that this has been helpful today.
Thank you, Megan, for this presentation. I think we're going to chew on this a little bit because there's a lot of material here and suggestions for incorporation. And we're, as you've heard before, and we'll hear a bit later, we're going to have a retreat soon where we're kind of going to look at incorporating some more changes. I don't know if anybody has any questions for Megan at this time, but just keeping in mind that we will have time to look at these when they're on paper in front of us, and to chew on this a little bit more at a time that's not this precise minute. But if there are any questions for Megan with that caveat from anyone.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank Megan for her ongoing commitment to our group and enhancing our knowledge and experience. I think that these conversations have been incredibly powerful and really useful as we start our planning forward. So I'm glad we've been able to really, have more dialogue related to this topic before we're in our cycle related to really taking a look at how we're going to do allocations and prioritizing the work for the year. So I just wanted to say thank you to our guest, and I'm excited, and I hope we do have some good and robust time in our retreat to really walk through some of this information and to rethink and enhance our ways that we're looking at our applications and our priorities for the year.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks for always being willing to share all of your thoughts with us. This is super helpful, and I look forward to being able to dive into this a little bit more. Now, I think we may have our public commenter online. Yes, Chad, you're nodding.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So AIM, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead, and you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Thank you. In comparator, I am on the north side of Pittsburgh, District 1, 15212. From what I'm seeing here today, one of the things that I think that hasn't been addressed is those people with disabilities that are 55 and under. There is virtually almost no place within the system to go at times. The seniors get a lot more attention than those that are younger with severe disabilities. Epilepsy, lupus, MS, there's quite a few to pick from that have disastrous effects on people and their bodies, and even young people in my building, which is Presley Street High Rise. We seem to have a reverse of this. Of course, not every community is the same, but Northside, at least with Presley and Pennsylvania Bidwell, have a higher ratio, to my understanding, of African Americans than to white populace. In regards to the tenant selection criteria, I wish some of this had been installed sooner. We have people that not just have poor credit history, we have a lot of people that are at risk that come in literally when they come in, and it's not just getting to know your neighbors kind of thing. It's more of once you move in, you're a consistent presence of criminal activity upon the floor that you've come, and other people respectively live there as well. I think it begins with the mentality of the building, with each building. I can understand why now, when I first came to Pittsburgh, why people did not accept the housing choice voucher program. I was on Section 8 before I came to Pittsburgh, and from Erie, got transferred over. The same type of buildings that were very poor kept were always on the same list, time and time and time again, in very bad condition. I wouldn't let a dog sleep there. In addition to that, I think that we have done some great damage in regards to potential properties. For instance, the Garden Apartments that are on Federal Street. HUD has specific requirements for their buildings. It has to be near a hospital, has to be on a bus line, has to be access to different things to make the person be able, or people or family be able to thrive. And instead of taking that building, which would have been an awesome example, you could have taken people from both Presley and a few other places with the amount of settings that building was offering. And instead, that building begins at $1,800 for the minimal apartment and goes up to $3,200 for the minimal top grade apartment per month. So multiply that times 3 for your top end, 3,200 times 3, that's 9,600, 18 times 3, that's 36 plus 18, 4,800, I believe, for your security deposit in the first 3 months down. Any building that, in my estimation, that is going to be a housing building for HUD, for Section 8, for low-income housing, should not have that 3-month rule on it at all. In fact, that 3-month rule has hindered my existence since I was trying to get out of my parents' apartment when I was a kid, about 18, 20 years old in Delaware. And so this is an interstate type of thing. We keep people out by initiating this 3 times rule, but by the same token, we are putting into our low-income housing, because I'll tell you, I have gotten many informative things that pop up on my
And I just
identity.
want to let you know that you're coming close to time here, so if you could wrap up your comments.
I will wrap up on this. I can't tell you how many times I have seen you have a new registered sex offender in your area where our housing projects are, where our low-income housing projects are. And quite frankly, that should not be a repetitive thing. So I will leave it on that. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Aim. All right. I don't believe we have any other public commenters registered.
I don't think we do, Kelly, but I think that tenant selection component of the comments is really important. And I know something that Megan also touched on. So I think that as we're, creating our running agenda with items, I think the, concept of tenant selection is one of those that we should definitely have on our radar. So if we can add that to our ongoing dialogue, I think that would be really wonderful. And also this question of accessibility, it's one that we sometimes see in applications, but not always. So just another item to be mindful of. We want really great, affordable and accessible housing, and accessible can mean a variety of things, and maybe taking some time this year to unpack that concept of accessibility and how we really promote it in the work that we're doing could be incredibly transformative. So I'll keep it in my mental checklist, but if we can keep pulling those threads forward, it would be really beneficial.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Our first item up is a proposal for an uptown development from Bethlehem Haven.
Hello. One moment. Sorry. Hello. My name is David DiBernardo. I'm a lending analyst with Residential Lending Department of the URA. I am here today seeking approval for a $500,000 rental gap program loan for phase 1 of the Bethlehem Haven project in the form of a 40-year 0% cash flow loan. This rental gap program loan request is only for phase 1 of a 2-phase project. Phase 1 is a renovation of the existing building known as Bethlehem Haven Women's Shelter. Phase 2 of this project will be a 9% low-income housing tax credit new construction in the adjacent buildings known as Uptown Flats. Bethlehem Haven's Women's Shelter has been operating at 1410 Fifth Avenue in Uptown since 2007. It is owned and operated by the nonprofit Bethlehem Haven of Pittsburgh, which is a fully owned subsidiary of Pittsburgh Mercy. The developer of this project is Action Housing, which has been developing and managing affordable housing projects since 1957. This 4-story building provides long-term housing and care for 26 women who may not be capable of living independently or have experienced chronic housing instability. This building is in dire need of renovations. Mechanical systems such as HVAC and plumbing have aged beyond their expected operational lifespan, causing disruptions in service and expensive maintenance. Currently, many of the women share rooms, including some rooms that house up to 3 individuals. One of the key components of this renovation plan is to reconfigure living space into 26 single-room occupancy units so that each resident will have their own private space. 20 of these units will be restricted to residents earning at or below 30% of area median income. The total renovation budget is $3,810,000, most of which has been raised and committed. 2 sources of funding which are still pending are the PHFA FAIR and the Home ARP funding. Those are expected to announce in the summer of 2023. Because of this, Bethlehem Haven's parent organization, Pittsburgh Mercy, has committed to providing the full amount of those anticipated awards for a total of $1.56 million in the form of a bridge loan. With this commitment, the approval of a $500,000 rental gap program loan will complete the budgeted $3.8 million capital stack to fully fund the renovations and allow the project to begin as scheduled in April 2023. Lastly, I would like to point out that this project is on a critically tight timeline. This past winter, the aging furnace at 1410 Fifth Avenue gave out. Bethlehem Haven has secured temporary accommodations for the residents, but only for the next year. To recap, I am here today seeking approval for a $500,000 rental gap program loan for phase 1 of the Bethlehem Haven project in the form of a 40-year, 0% interest cash flow loan. And now I would like to introduce the executive director of Bethlehem Haven, Annette Fetchko. Annette is going to make a statement to the board about this project, and then Annette and I will be happy to answer any questions the board may have. Annette, you may begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. First of all, I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to present this very important project for the ability for individuals who cannot safely live independently in the community to have a place to call home. The Bethlehem Haven Phase 1 project that David presented and is referring to allows 26 women who, for various physical and behavioral health disabilities, do not have the ability to live independently, even with wraparound supportive services in the community. Many of these women have called Bethlehem Haven home for more than 15 years. The mission of Bethlehem Haven is to really provide safe and quality housing for the individuals that we're privileged to serve. The women at 1410, the residential facility that we're requesting the funding for, need a place that they can safely live in and a place to really feel that they are given the quality and the respect in terms of a facility. This is a very old building. We are, as David mentioned, under really a crisis initiative right now because of just some of the failing infrastructure of the building. We have been successful in securing transitional housing, and we are ready to really move forward with the project with the addition of this approval today. This project, however, is part of a much broader initiative along Bethlehem Haven's mission to provide a continuum of care for individuals experiencing homelessness. As David mentioned, we are also actively engaged in the pre-development planning for a 34-unit low-income affordable housing development that will be connected to our 1410 residential building along Fifth Avenue bordering Stevenson. We are really privileged to be a part of this project in partnership with Action Housing that will provide wraparound supportive services for individuals in Studio 1 and 2-bedroom units. We believe in the investment in the Uptown community. We believe in investment in individuals and families and their ability to live, work, play, and grow in high quality, safe housing. So I'll pause there and ask if anyone has any questions and express my thanks again for the opportunity to present this project.
Hi, this is Derek. Thank you for that presentation. I think this is a great project. And when we get to the voting portion, I'll need to recuse myself. But I was looking at the project and specifically the rents for the project. They were quite high. I was a little bit surprised. But can you just speak on how you're able to charge those rates? Is there subsidy from another source, but how that's able to work given the population you're serving?
So thank you for that question, Derek. So phase one is funded by two funding sources, a HUD contract for 16 of the women that we're privileged to serve and have them call home. And then 10 are funded through the Office of Behavioral Health, through Allegheny County's Office of Behavioral Health. So for phase one, there are not rents that are charged. If the individual has an income, we limit that to less than 30% of their income is really requested in the form of a rental subsidy. Phase two is what perhaps I think you're referring to, which is the 34 low-income affordable housing units. It looks quite high, primarily because this is how HUD contracts work. They really bundle everything together. So they bundle the services, the cost for those wraparound services, et cetera. So I hope that answers your question, Derek.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. This is Jody Lincoln from Action Housing too. So with the pro forma, right, just the way we had to do the HUD contracts as income, kind of put them in as unit rents. So those aren't actually negotiated with rent, with HUD as the rent per unit. But that's kind of the calculation of the full contract per the amount of units that it's covering and the amount of women that it covers. So that's really the full income from HUD, covers the operations of the building, covers a ton of staff time for the, Bethlehem Haven staff that provides 24/7 support on site. So the way the pro forma is set up didn't really allow us to express that as a separate kind of form of income. We had to assign it as rents. So that 1,500 and 3,000 doesn't actually reflect an assigned rent amount.
Yeah, that absolutely does not reflect an assigned rent amount. I think it had more to do with the pro forma matrix and how we had to provide that data and information.
Okay, yeah, that part answers it. Yeah, I was just speaking specifically about the 26 SRO units, but it sounds like HUD essentially is your HUD contract is providing that revenue source as opposed to the tenants paying that amount directly. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome, Derek. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Deb Gross, and I have to admit, I didn't really process my packet before you started speaking, so I'm really pleased to see that I heard you call this transitional housing, and that you have a HUD contract for it. So this is, again, as you were just telling Mr. Tillman, fully staffed 24-hour support that's provided rent-free to the occupants, right? Because it's covered under the HUD contract if they have no source of income.
That's correct.
Includes meals, et cetera. We have been advocating for additional transitional housing in the city. So I didn't know this project was coming through the pipeline, but I sit on a committee with other council members that President Teresa Cale Smith created on homelessness. And in our kind of policy research and learning, we really realized that the other housing first cities are able to do what they're doing because they have transitional housing. And I keep saying that we do have nonprofits providing transitional housing in the city, but the ones I toured weren't getting a single dime of city support or a single dime of county support. I toured one that's getting entirely Veterans Affairs money through the Veterans Administration. And so this is similarly coming straight from HUD, or is it like HUD through county contracts? Could you, I'm trying to click on my screen and scroll through your packet, so I apologize if that's stated somewhere else.
No, Deborah, yeah, let me respond to that, and thank you for your advocacy. So the funding that we receive is as a recipient through the county. HUD, the county negotiates with HUD. We receive then the funding through the county. The county manages the HUD contracts, and we are a service provider contracted through the county. The 26 units that we are referring to, Deborah, are residential permanent supportive housing. These are women who, because of their physical and behavioral health disabilities, cannot live independently in the community. So I just want to be very sensitive to the definition of transitional housing and the definition of permanent supportive housing. Some of these women are able to move along the homeless continuum, where they at some point may be able to, through extensive and ongoing wraparound supportive services, be able to transition into permanent supportive housing in the community. But many of these individuals have been part of the Bethlehem Haven residential program at 1410 for 10 plus years.
Deb, I'll just add the contracts should be in the packet if you get the full application as attachment 15 labeled DHS contracts. So I don't know if yours looks like our submission, but they were included in the application.
Yeah, I have it, and I'm scrolling, so I will try to find that, Jody. Thank you. And again, I'm just thank you for clarifying the vocabulary. I've been similarly. I think it's really important that we all try to use the same vocabulary. So this is not really, this is permanent housing, but it's permanent supportive housing. Whereas I keep saying it this way at City Council, just to remind everybody, the HUD definition of transitional housing means like up to 24 months.
Correct.
They use that, and it's hard for us to keep our terms consistent so that we don't misunderstand what each other are talking about. So I really appreciate that. I love the SRO as well. I think we have a lot more room we could be doing in our system for that. And I've said that to Action Housing in many different ways, in many different venues. So I'm really grateful that Action Housing has been expanding our single room occupancy choices throughout the city. So I'm really happy to see this project. I really appreciate this work, and I'm glad to know that you all are doing this work. And I think that even more units like this, but not just permanently supportive, but also if we had more of these kinds of units in our transitional housing pipeline, we would have not nearly as many people on the street, not by choice. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Deborah, for your advocacy. We appreciate it.
That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Do we have, I'm sorry, I see that your hand is raised, but generally we're trying to keep the same format that we would have if we were in person, in which case we don't take questions from the gallery. It seems very clunky to do so virtually. However, that is our format, and so I'm sorry that we won't be able to take your question at this time. But did any advisory board members have questions regarding this project for the team? If not, is anyone prepared to make a motion on this project?
Sorry, I'll motion to approve.
Okay. Unfortunately, you have to read the entire slide, which is proposed wording for said motion.
Under the action slide?
Yes.
Okay.
We did not always have this slide. This is an improvement because we used to try to on the fly create a paragraph long motion, and so now we have these prepared by our.
I'm happy to read it. Motion to authorize to enter a rental gap program loan agreement in the amount of up to $500,000 with Bethlehem Haven of Pittsburgh for the renovation of Bethlehem Haven's women's shelter at 1410 Fifth Avenue.
And Jamil will second that motion.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed?
I need to abstain, Kelly.
Okay, that's next to say I know we have
Okay.
Lena as an abstention. We already have Derek Tillman as an abstention. Do we have any others? Okay. The motion carries. Congratulations on this very exciting project.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very grateful on behalf of everyone we serve. Thank you.
Right. I believe we have one more. Are we on to administrative items? Okay, great. Chad, I believe this is yours.
Yeah, and we did have Sushila talk at the beginning of this meeting, but Sushila Namani Stanger has become the new executive director of the URA. So we are very excited to have her on board. And I will pass it over to Derek to talk about the small contractor line of credit program.
All right. Thank you, Jad. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek Kendall Morris. I'm the manager of consumer lending for the housing department at the URA, and wanted to let the board and the public know about the small contractor line of credit program that the URA is relaunching. And there's going to be a webinar on February 8th at 5:30 p.m. For anyone who's interested in applying or learning more about that program. This will be a line of credit that will be available to small contractors who are interested in bidding on projects that the URA may be looking for contractors for, or the city, but may not be able to, upfront the costs that would be required to take on that project. So this is an opportunity for smaller contractors to engage with URA and enable themselves to take on projects with city government and the URA that they wouldn't be able to necessarily otherwise. So again, it's February 8th at 5:30. The program itself is line of credit that's up to $100,000 that can be used for projects where they would need to upfront those costs for us. So wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. We're particularly excited about this in terms of the Housing Opportunity Fund because our homeowner assistance program and some of our other programs, we are always looking for smaller contractors who are looking to do small renovation projects across the city, and HAP is a really good example of a program where the contractor in many cases is required to sort of upfront the material costs and some of the permitting costs on those projects because we operate on a reimbursement basis as a quasi-governmental entity. So through this line of credit, those contractors might be able to engage with HAP and increase our capacity to do more of those projects each year. So we're excited about this, and we would like to make sure people know about it and can participate. So I don't know if there are any questions about that I can attempt to answer, but that's a webinar coming up on the 8th.
No questions, Derek. Just wanted to say great job. It is very much a resource that many of our contractors need. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, no, this is very exciting. It's one of those things where you can solve multiple problems, perhaps with one program. So I'm very excited to see this coming to fruition. Thank you for your diligence on this. So I know we've talked about the HAP wait list for a couple of years, and this is one of those identifiable things that were like, well, then can we fix it? And here we are. So thank you very much for this, Derek.
Yeah, and a big thank you to our commercial lending staff who created this program and then collaborated with the housing team to make sure that contractors who engage with us would be eligible for this. So commercial lending staff has done a really great job with this program, and we're excited about it.
And then we have Derek next again to talk
Yes.
about the PGH homeownership program.
Yes. So for those who are not aware, the OWN PGH program is officially open and was launched this Tuesday. So this is a new first-time home buyer program that is available to anyone who is interested in purchasing a home within the city of Pittsburgh. Participants in the program would be eligible for up to $90,000 to make the home that they're trying to purchase more attainable or affordable to them. So that $90,000 comes in the form, or would come in the form, of a $50,000 grant from the URA, and then a $40,000 matching loan from the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. That loan is a 0% interest forgivable loan that's forgiven over a 10-year period. So we're really, really excited about this program. We think we're going to be able to help hundreds of families over the next few years gain access to homeownership who wouldn't be able to do so otherwise. And it's just a very exciting program. So right now there are 3 lenders that are participating as we roll out the program initially and work out the kinks. So to apply, an applicant would first have to pre-qualify for a first mortgage from First Commonwealth Bank, SSB Bank, or Dollar Bank, and then those lenders would help that home buyer apply to the OWN PGH program, and we would evaluate them for eligibility at that time. So they'll have to go through these lenders first, qualify for that mortgage, and then come to the URA for the additional support through OWN PGH. So tremendously exciting program. This program is funded in a partnership with the Housing Authority and the American Rescue Plan funds that the URA has received. So just a really exciting opportunity that's going to help a lot of people over the next few years. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that program, but I'd be happy to answer those.
Derek, can we layer this with our down payment and closing cost program, or is this okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And we anticipate that we'll see a lot of that happening.
And this is also on top of any sort of programming that I noticed those 3 banks are like the regular players in this space. So like this will be on top of any aggressive like programs that those banks offer for folks who are looking for affordable housing, right?
Correct. Yeah. Our goal in designing the program was really to make sure that it would play nicely and layer with everything else that's in the space, so that we can really make homeownership accessible to a wide swath of people.
That's great. This is amazing.
Well, thank you all very much.
Next, we have Evan Miller to talk about the downtown conversion pilot program.
Sure. Thanks, Chad. I wanted to let the advisory board know about another exciting program that the URA recently launched, actually earlier this week as well, called the Pittsburgh Downtown Conversion Program. And this is an American Rescue Plan funded program that is looking to convert vacant or underutilized office buildings in specifically the central business district, and provide funding to owners or developers that are interested in converting that space into residential uses that would include a component of affordability. So this program is open right now. It's on the URA's website on our proposals and bids section. It's a rolling RFP, and we're excited about this program. It's something we haven't really done before, and we're hoping to see some great projects. And I do think that there is an opportunity that, depending on the unit mix and the subsidy need for different projects, that perhaps the rental gap program could be involved along with some of the downtown conversion money, if depending on the size of the project. So it's possible that the Housing Opportunity Fund sees some of these projects, but I did want to make you all generally aware of this program in case you or anyone in your networks has interest as well. So wanted to bring that to the board's attention. And if you do have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but that can be found on our website if you want more info as well. Well, and I can also take the next one here, Jad, the Housing Preservation Program. This is another program funded through the American Rescue Plan that is not quite operational yet. And I wanted to let the board know that last month, staff took draft guidelines to the URA board, and they've been posted for the last few weeks seeking public comment on them. You may have seen it on our website. And the intention is to go to the February URA board meeting for final guidelines, but this program is meant to really provide quick access to capital for projects that are at risk, that are currently affordable rental as it's constituted right now. They're at risk of turning to market rates. So sometimes we see naturally occurring affordable housing that's had a long time owner that is looking to get rid of their portfolio. And at times, actually, HOF's been involved in efforts like that to provide funding to a socially minded buyer who is going to keep those portfolios affordable. So the preservation program is kind of a shot in the arm to do more of that. We also have funds available to do actual renovations if there's capital needs at a given property, some deficiencies that might put federal subsidies in jeopardy at a project. If we can stabilize that property and preserve that affordable housing, that's really the goal of this program. So another exciting program and opportunity that's come about with the American Rescue Plan. And I would look for that RFP and program to be open sometime in the early spring here at the URA. But yeah, if there's no questions, I'll pass it back to Jad.
Yep, that's all we got for URA admin updates.
Well, I mean, that's all you've got, for new and exciting programs and a new executive director. That's quite a bit of an update, from month to month. This is all very exciting, and we look forward to layering our projects and programs in as it makes sense. I think our next item, is the next item up, are the Housing Advisory Board administrative items. We have committee reports. We heard pretty extensively from Megan Comfort-Hammond, who is on the Fair Housing Advisory Board a little bit earlier, but I think I know that Mark had to leave a little bit earlier, but if I can impress upon Adrienne, if you have an update from that meeting that you would like to share with everyone?
I believe that Megan really touched on the highlights of what we discussed. So I don't think I need to belabor, but just, this is exciting for us to be able to work with the Fair Housing Partnership, and we look forward to the ongoing relationship. And if there are new members of the HOF that would like to participate in the Fair Housing Committee, you can let myself or Mark Masterson or Kelly know, and we'll make sure that we get you plugged in.
Excellent. So we have up next, we've just been discussing the retreat. We've had a little bit of a challenging time finding a place that was available, that was not that was affordable, that had the timing in terms of what worked well for our timeline. But we did get a doodle of sorts out earlier today. If everybody can please take a minute to select the dates that work for them for that retreat. We would like to go ahead and get that started and get, we know everybody's busy, so now we're into the middle of March instead of the end of February, early March, and so we definitely want to go ahead and get that underway. which kind of rolls into the next one after we meet together and really kind of drill into direction, get to know each other a little bit better. Some of us haven't not all convened in this configuration in person before. We would like to take that vision and figure out who's going to champion that vision in the form of our next chair. I don't recall if it's a co-chair or a vice chair, as well as going from the vision into what type of committees that we would like to have, and then selecting chairs for those committees, and everybody kind of deciding what committees they would like to participate on. There's enough active and engaged people on the board right now that it doesn't have to be the same usual suspects across all of the committees. And so I'm excited about that. Right now we have established a community outreach committee and a fair housing committee, but that is by no means the extent of the committees that we need to have as part of the advisory board, but we'll figure out what those are after the retreat. So please, again, take a few minutes to complete that form. We will feed you. It should be a good generative time. I'm very much looking forward to this. This is not something that we've done yet. And this is, I believe, the 5th year of the HOF's existence. And so this is the first time that we're coming together to really chart our course in a very strategic way. We don't have the date for that yet, as I mentioned before, but we are targeting the election to be April 6th at that meeting. The idea is that we will create this vision together. Leaders will bubble to the top. They will reach out to myself and whoever else is interested in serving on the nominating committee with me. To be on the nominating committee, you would be a member of the advisory board who is not running for office. I am term restricted from running for anything. So that is, I'm the only person that definitely is able to be on the nominating committee. But if you are interested in serving on a nominating committee, please let me know. The last time that we did elections, there was a form that we'd asked everybody to fill out, kind of stating their vision, what they bring to the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. And then there were actually phone interviews with the candidates. And then the nominating committee made their recommendations. Slightly less extensive process, but we'd also like to do nominations for the chair positions of these committees as well. So again, the goal is to get the retreat in, have everybody's information back in. I'll give the opportunity for the nominating committee, join me in the nominating committee to review said information, and then get packets out so that we can vote in at our April 6th meeting. And that is the timeline for the nominations for chair, co-chair, and then each of the committee chairs. And that's all I've got in terms of administrative items. And any questions, comments, concerns on any of that?
Kelly, this is Paul. I did not receive that email, so I don't know if that's something that other folks didn't receive as well.
So I sent it out earlier today. If you check your email and you didn't get it, I can resend it to you just to make sure.
Thanks, Chad.
Yep.
Yeah, I received mine just fine, but it was this
Yeah.
afternoon. I don't know if it has to do with your spam or.
Yeah, just let me know if
I received mine as well.
Okay.
The dollar does have aggressive spam features. I do I do know that. All right, if there's no other questions or concerns, I think we have the expenditures updates from Jad, and we are almost done.
Yep, we are on the last leg. So I know that some of you had requested last time that we add an additional tab to this. It's in progress, but we are not there yet to present it to you all with the spent versus committed and closed. So that will be in one of our upcoming meetings here with the additional information. Just an FYI that is being worked on. But really the biggest change that we saw from last month, there were increases across all programs, but The biggest one was the City's Edge project that got thrown in for the rental gap program, added a very significant amount of additional funding that was committed. So that was one positive thing with that. For down payment and closing cost, as per usual, we have percent funds spent by AMI level and then percent funds spent by City Council District. As I go through these slides on each program, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me as I move along. For the legal assistance program, we have percent of households served by AMI level and by City Council District. For the housing stabilization program, the same thing, households served by AMI and City Council District. Homeowner assistance program, I included the same information that I did last time with some of the additional funding, what was in the pipeline. There were some increases and decreases as some of the funding was allocated and actual amounts were indicated because the project moved forward. So there were some adjustments here. And then the for sale development and rental gap programs, the number of units by AMI and number of percent funds spent by council district. And these just changed slightly from the rental gap program going through from City's Edge. And that's all we have for program expenditures. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay.
All right. Well, if there are no questions for Jad, thank you everyone for your patience and your diligence and attendance this afternoon. And we will next meet Thursday, March 2nd at 2 o'clock, ideally in City Council chambers. And we will let you know if there's a change to that, which would be the location, not the time. And by then we'll also be able, within the next week, we'll be able to announce what the dates are for the retreat. So with no further ado, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Paul. All right. Have a great month if I don't see you in the meantime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.